Good night of Shabbos, everyone. This week's Torah portion is called Parshas Emor. Emor is a portion that deals with the holidays and also talks about the special responsibility that the priests have in protecting their sanctity. And the Torah says, Emor ela kohanim, speak to the kohanim. And then it says, V'omarta aleim, and you will speak to them. Wait a second, it already says speak to the kohanim. What is the and you will speak to them? What's the second and you will speak to them? And the answer is, you speak to the kohanim and get them to speak to their children. Well, the question is, why should there be a special commandment to speak to your children? We already have that in the Torah. It says, V'shinantam levanecha. You should teach the Torah laws to your children. So why is there a special directive to the priests to teach their children the laws of sanctity? Isn't this part of the laws of the Torah? So the answer is, the Torah analyzes each situation. And where there is a need for extra stress, the Torah covers that base. Kids have a way of being mean and cruel. And that applies not just to people who are different religions, different races. Kids can be cruel even to people who are the same as them, but a little different. The Kohanim were given special portions to eat by God. These were gifts that were given only to the Kohanim. And the Kohanim, in receiving these gifts, had to make sure that they came into no contact with the general population, because the general population did not have to stay away from things that are impure. The general population can go to a funeral, can go to a cemetery without any problems, except during the holiday time, they had to prepare themselves a few weeks beforehand to make sure that they could enter the temple. But a priest, a Kohen, has to always be careful not to enter a cemetery, not to have any contact with the dead, because the priests were given special challah, special food that nobody else except for the priest was entitled to have, because of the special privilege that the priests had in providing the rest of the population with services in the temple. And so the priest had something special that the other kids couldn't do. A child of a priest got things that the other kids couldn't have. And also had to keep himself away from some of the things that the other kids were doing. He couldn't play their games everywhere they played. He had to be careful to make sure not to come into contact with any dead objects, any dead animals, and so on, so he could be able to eat his sandwich of truma. And this distinction was not lost on the children. Children would identify. They would call them Yochanan Ochel Chalas. Oh, Joe, the one that eats those chalas. Yeah, the challah eater. And they could be cruel, and they could be very, very mean because of their jealousy that the others were given something that they couldn't have. But in the process, instead of being showing that they were jealous, they would try to make fun. So a child who's a Kohen, let's see, he's one out of a class, or two out of a class of 20, 25, and maybe one out of 30, whatever the percentages were, this could get the kid to feel bad about himself. So the Torah says to the parents and to the elders of the community, tell the kids it's okay to be different. It's okay to have greater responsibility. It's okay to be given something by God that somebody else doesn't have. You don't have to worry about the fact that the others are jealous and are sniping at you. So you see that the Torah teaches us to teach our children positive things, the good things. And then for those people who have greater opportunities, for whatever reason, God has granted them greater opportunities, you have to instill in them a pride of being happy who they are, that they have greater opportunities, greater responsibilities. Instead of allowing children to tear them down for the fact that they have special things that they can do that others can't do. And therefore, the Torah teaches us a great lesson here. And it's a lesson that shows you why CRT is against the Torah, dangerous, evil, and should never be taught. Teaching people to think badly about themselves because they were given something that was special or that gives them special status is not what you have to teach people. You don't teach people to think badly about themselves. You teach people to be thankful that they have something and that they can share it with somebody else, or that they know how to deal with that particular thing. Let's say you're a child of wealthy parents. The parents understand that kids could be jealous, so the parents have to explain to the child, without looking down at other children, that you've been given greater opportunity because you have greater responsibility. And therefore you have to see to it to help others when you grow up. Instead of tearing the child down and saying somehow or other, this makes you guilty because you got something that somebody else doesn't have. That's in a nutshell. Anytime you teach children to think negatively about themselves for something that they themselves did not do and that they're not responsible for, and maybe they should feel proud of certain things. Anytime your focus is to try to tear people down, you're doing the wrong thing. Even if CRT was properly motivated, even if it taught the truth, 100% truth, it would be wrong because it tears people down and tears people apart. But it's false and negative and destructive and harmful, and perpetuates the very problem that it supposedly tries to address. But besides getting into that, besides the political aspect of it, from an educational point, our job as educators is make people proud of who they are, make people happy that they have their opportunities, whatever opportunities they have, make people responsible to do what they need to do. In other words, education's got to be positive and not negative, like CRT.